All right. I just want to welcome everybody. It's been a while since I've done a video, and today I'm extremely excited because I have Kim Boling. And I our paths crossed about a year ago, and Kim has just been a wealth of knowledge and has added so much to how I view the world. And so I wanted to give this opportunity for Kim to get a mustard seed of hope out and to help us with verbiage and just a different lens of how we view others. And so Kim, I'm going to hand it over to you so you can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be talking with you. Um, I'll just say a little bit about me. So I am a psychologist in private practice in Southern New Hampshire, about an hour north of Boston. And I've been married for over 33 years. It'll be 34 years this year, to a wonderful man. I'm a cisgender, heterosexual, obviously white-bodied woman. I am in a mixed neurology marriage. None of us have diagnoses in my family, but we recognize that our ways of thinking and our ways of being in the world are very different from each other. I have two grown and flown young adult children who live locally, thank goodness. So it's been a great ride so far. I do a lot of couples work. My passion is in working with mixed neurology couples. And I came to IFS, more than a decade ago, and just as probably you, Tara, and many people who might see this have been on that trajectory as well. And then always interested in couples work, and then moved into IFIO, which is a couples modality built on top of IFS. And I'm an assistant trainer for IFIO now, and just really love working with mixed neurology couples. It feels like all of my background kind of converged around this passion of mine, so that's been really fun.
Yeah, and I just want you to take a moment just to slow down and help people with the terminology because this may be the first time that they actually hear it framed this way.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I would love to talk today about neurodiversity and how that may fit in with IFS and the neurodiversity paradigm. Some common terms, and they're very similar words. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, and of course, language is always evolving. But for the most part, the term neurodiversity, it refers to a paradigm and a movement, but it also can refer to a group of people, not a single individual, but as a comparison between two or more people, if people are different from each other. So it's got an inherent comparison in the name when you're using it to refer to groups of people. For an individual that may have different neurological wiring than the majority, we will refer to that person as neurodivergent. So not neurodiverse, but neurodivergent.
Mhm.
And so that's for a single individual. And then for people where their neurology does align for the most part with the majority, we refer to those people as neurotypical. So all very similar words and easily confused. As always, if you're wanting to get it right, practice and learn and try, but also give yourself grace, for making mistakes, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it really sounds like you've been on a journey with it. You didn't start out in this exact field, but it definitely feels as though as time has gone, you've navigated and this is where you've arrived. And as you said,
Exactly.
you have great passion for working with the neurodiverse couples. And
Absolutely.
what do you really want people to know about this neurodiversity paradigm and how it shows up in between? We're going to first start just with couples.
Okay, yeah, great. So what I would really love to share with folks is, and I will say that I myself am neurotypical. So my lived experience is not as a neurodivergent person. I have mixed feelings about that. I know it's not ideal for me to be speaking on the topic when I myself am neurotypical. However, I am in a mixed neurology marriage, and I do have lived experience that way. And my work with couples, oftentimes I'm working with couples where one partner is neurotypical and the other partner is neurodivergent.
Mhm.
And in particular, within that, neurodiversity refers to a lot of different forms of neurodivergence, ADHD, Tourette's, dyslexia, autism. There can also be acquired neurodivergence, like a brain injury. But mostly I'm going to be referring to autism today when we talk. Um, so anyway, I got away from your question, Tara. Sorry about that. Um, what I really feel so passionately about is that unfortunately, autism in particular, is still really pathologized. There's current research and there are current publications and current therapists that are still talking about really harmful misconceptions, such as that neurodivergent people or autistic people don't have empathy, and that's completely false, and really, really harmful. And I think, the whole framework that autism has been built on is or understood through a lens of severe pathology. And, I think that people in the neurodiversity, that operate in the neurodiversity paradigm, understand that there's a lot going on here. First of all, the world is really set up to be comfortable for the majority, right? Whatever, or the groups in power, right? And in this domain, that would be neurotypical. So, for example, if someone has a lot of sensory sensitivities, a grocery store can be a really hard thing. And that's not because, we're not thinking of it that, in underneath the umbrella of the social model of disability, that's a disability because of the environment. It's not a disability because of inherent characteristics of the person. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so coming back to your question, Tara, I'm off on a tear here. That that I feel passionate about doing therapy and working with my clients and particularly my couples from this non-pathologizing viewpoint. I think there's almost no possibility of success in a relationship if one person is feeling like they're better than the other, right? Or more right than the other. That's really a problem.
Yeah. And really, and I want people to hear more because we hear a lot about the spectrum.
Right,
Oh, they're on the spectrum, right? And
right.
that's a term that I believe that we as a society have really just learned to throw around. And what's really vital here is that, and I learned this from you, so that's why I'm pulling it in, is that the majority of us have traits of on the spectrum, and we don't really talk about that.
Mm, hmm. Right, right. And I don't know where DSM and ICD will go in the future, obviously, but that is part of the framework of setting it up even as a pathology, because I think when with the term spectrum, I think many people think of, basically a one-dimensional line, where there's more or less, almost as a unitary construct. And it's, that's not accurate. It's so much more complex than that. And so the traits that you're referring to, Tara, could be things like sensory sensitivities. It could be preference for routine. It could be deep interests. It could be trouble with communication. It could be trouble with social things. And it's true that all of us do have a mix of all of those things. If you think about like an old school equalizer. I don't know if I don't know if you know what, if that's a familiar metaphor for people or not, but, basically like bass and treble and all of these different qualities can be at more or less. And so, but there is something, although autism and neurodiversity certainly is incredibly diverse in and of itself, there's a lot of heterogeneity that plays into that, and it's not well understood. Nonetheless, there is sort of a common core or a common cluster that people who are autistic can identify with and can kind of almost feel into a different cultural experience around it even.
Yeah. And to pull this back to couples, because there may be someone listening that maybe has even said, oh, you have to be on the spectrum to their spouse, or you're not getting it because of the communications just falling apart, or even when and so for me, I look at it as more of like a tenacious, that tenacity of you get hooked on something and you can't let it go.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that, Tara. Do you mind if I
Go.
respond?
Yes.
Because, that's exactly it, right? Like, so that, the pathologizing viewpoint is, oh, you're cognitively rigid or you're, not flexible. And first of all, that's in and of itself quite complicated. There's a lot of factors that go into how people show up in, in that kind of way. But to your point, why are so many autistic people engineers, many autistic people, it's a common career
Yeah.
because that's a career that needs tenacity, right? You wouldn't want your car, you wouldn't want the people that are designing your car and its safety features to give up if the problem got too hard and say good enough, right?
Yeah.
Same with the software that we run on our computers, it has to work. And so tenacity, being a former software engineer myself, tenacity is a hugely important in being able to get things to work well or into understanding, a lot of detail about any particular topic. You need a stick-to-itiveness and a capacity for understanding all of this detail and staying with something to make it work the way you want it to.
Yeah. And even as so I'm sitting here and I'm listening and holding both, right? Holding the one in the couple who's more of that, has, the tenacity. We're just going to stay with this as the example, has more of that tenacious ability to focus in and stay with the problem, and the neurotypical seeing that and could really make meaning of their behavior that is very far from how the person's actually feeling.
That is so true. So true. Right. 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 That's a big thing with couples that we see. And, anecdotally in my practice, I work with a lot of mixed neurology couples, in particular of that configuration where one partner is neurotypical and one partner is autistic. That's a common uh, demographic that I work with. And yes, you're exactly right. Very often I'm doing a lot more work, at least initially in the couples work with the neurotypical partner to help them separate, sort of facts from stories, right? And a lot of times those stories that people tell are themselves are based on neurotypical expectations.
Mm.
So for example, a very easy example, not every autistic person is like this, of course, but many autistic people are uncomfortable with eye contact to a different degree than your average neurotypical person, statistically speaking. Again, knowing everybody's different. Um, but that being said, a neurotypical person might look at lack of eye contact as disinterest or dismissiveness, or he or she doesn't like me, or they're mad at me, or all kinds of things that can get superimposed on that. And again, it's kind of coming from a lens of expecting neurotypical responses and misreading. And in your example, Tara, of what was the example you just gave of one person wanting to stay on one topic and one person wanting to change topic?
Mhm.
Who gets to decide? Why is one right and one wrong, right? If I'm in a conversation with someone and I feel like it's time to move on, I feel like it's time to move on. The other person might not feel that way, right? And so in relationship with each other, how do we navigate those, little bumps, big bumps, whatever it might be, without one person being the, holder of the truth about what is supposed to happen?
Yeah, and we know that when you have the diversity in the marriage like this, that we are in that neurotypical society. And so we know that it is going to be more aimed towards what makes the neurotypical comfortable.
Right.
And right there's a big trade for the one who's neurodiverse.
Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so right there in that moment of I want to move on, but my partner wants to keep talking. And I want to move on because it's going to keep me comfortable. Right.
Right, exactly.
I'm done with the conversation. And what gets lost here in the translation is the partner who's still on it still has things that want to be seen with it.
Right, right,
And that's behavior is really huge in this because for someone to feel seen, it's understanding what's happening inside, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions. And that actually can be extremely challenging for the neurodiverse
absolutely.
to tap in. And because in a neurotypical person, we can tap in and fly through it. But someone who's not neurotypical, asking them to do that, what do they feel? Do they
Right,
remember this? How did you feel?
right,
That reflection and that internal reflection can be challenging.
right,
And
absolutely.
and so they may hang on a topic because they're still gritting out all the they're making sure everything locks in for them and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And just right there, how much conflict can happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the kind of thing, Tara, I know you're also an IFIO therapist. That's the kind of thing that with the IFS and the IFIO modalities, self-led conversations, making the space as safe as can be, that helps people to be able to talk about that in a way that probably without a therapist there initially, at least they may never get to. And so by being able to help couples have some of those conversations, we're really slowing down the process and helping them see each other for who they really are and understand each other better. And then, hopefully have more compassion for each other's needs and wants rather than sort of being focused in on, this is the way it should be kind of thing.
Mhm.
Or, in kind of the scenario you're suggesting, an autistic partner may be feeling shut down and frustrated and increasing the shame and self-doubt, because the dominant narrative is you talk too much or you talk too little or something like that.
Yeah. And right there, shame. And I know you're probably sitting in a similar boat to me as far as I do believe shame is so deeply rooted in all of us. And we all do a whole lot of different strategies not to feel it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so for the autistic person, they from the time that they're little really hear too much, too fidgety, to this, to that. And parents will then put them on medications. And I'm not going to say parents are wrong for that or bad for that. They put them on medications so that their child can get through the school day
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
a non-disruptive way. That tends to be the hope of what I hear.
Hmm.
And in that, we are teaching them that you have to be neurotypical, you have to take medication so that you make other people comfortable. And I want to swoop this back around to what you said. We want our engineers, we want people to have that tenacity
Right.
to stay with problems because this community of individuals really do add gifts to our society that without them, we wouldn't have some of the pleasures that we all have.
Hmm. 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 Pleasures and necessities even too. And I really appreciate what you're saying, Tara, because I think you're speaking to, whether it's parents or early school experiences or other communities, from a very early age, neurodivergent kids of all different neurologies, including ADHD, is very much true for this, or dyscalculia, dyslexia, that they're always getting these messages of you're not okay how you are. Something's wrong with you. We need to medicate it away, or we need to treat it away, or and people learn to mask, as we know,
Mhm.
to stay safe in the world, to fit in with society. It's exhausting and draining, and it's really requiring the society is really demanding, in a sense, that neurodivergent people act in a manager part in order to, as you said, make the neurotypical people comfortable. And that's really the essence of oppression, right? That this idea, and I wish I knew where this, it's not an exact quote, and I don't know the origin, and I wish I did, but it's something that I really hold a lot for all different forms of marginalization and oppression, that privilege, which we could say neurotypical people have privilege that neurodivergent people don't. For now, hopefully that'll change someday. But that privilege is honoring one group's comfort over another group's trauma.
Mm.
So we're not even comparing comfort to comfort, right? We're comparing comfort to trauma. And I think that's exactly what you were just describing, right? We're trying to make the neurotypical people comfortable, take my pace of conversation, don't move in ways that I don't like, whatever it might be, make eye contact when I want to make eye contact. We're constantly, conforming, whether it's parents or schools or churches or friends, constantly requiring neurodivergent people to fit in a way that isn't organic necessarily for them, which is just, a petri dish of shame, right? That's it right there.
Yeah.
And being forced.
Yes. And I just listened to Dr. I think Dan Siegel on, I was just listening to one of his talks, randomly happened upon it. And he had said, when people feel truly seen, it's not that you're focusing on their behaviors. And that's one of the big misses that parents do, is that they focus solely on the child's behavior and not on their internal experience.
That's so important what you're saying. Wow.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even if you can apply that to, you're in a marriage, and when you get fixated on your partner's behavior, you're not slowing down for what's happening internally. You just want the behavior to stop so that you can, whatever it is.
Right, right, right.
And some of it could be so I can stop feeling shame, because when you do this, I make meaning that you don't love me or I'm not a priority.
Right, exactly, exactly. And if there's space, Tara, I can share with you a very simple example of that in my own marriage. So, and this isn't particularly related to neurodiversity, but it's the kind of thing that could illustrate exactly what you're saying. And so I grew up in a household where it's a silly topic, but I think there's a lot of message in it for me as a couples therapist, and wanting to be in a happy marriage, which I am. But it's been work to get there, right? Everything's work. And anyway, I grew up in a family where we always said, God bless you when somebody sneezed. It's a silly topic. And in my husband's family, not so much. They're all very quiet, and they just never did. Fine, no moral meaning either way, right? Like there isn't. And also usually when someone sneezes, thankfully in 2024, well, there is COVID, but but it's usually not the most serious thing in the world necessarily. So it's not like we're really worried about somebody's health usually, in a dangerous way anyway. But it used to always bug me, right? So I would sneeze and there'd be, crickets, and I'm like, he doesn't love me, right? There I go to the stories, or I'm not important enough for him to notice, And it's funny because, those are my parts talking, and I could even have some self-led awareness that what I'm saying is silly. I may or may not have that, right? But the feelings are still there. The parts don't know necessarily, right? And so I used to kind of give my husband periodically a hard time about it. And I'd say, could you say God bless you when I sneeze? And he'd say, okay, and then he wouldn't. And then other times I'm like, I might be snarky about it. This didn't happen a lot. It wasn't like a constant fight in our marriage once in a while. And sometimes I would try speaking for my parts, and I would say, can't you do this? Can't you put in this effort for me? Is it really that hard for you? Why? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, fast forward to only a few years ago, and it happened, and I don't know why, it set me off a little bit. And I thought to myself, I wonder what is actually going on with him, which was something that I never wondered about before, right?
Mhm.
And this is bringing it back to your actual point, right? And so I started thinking, well, what if he just doesn't notice? What if he's got the noise tuned out, which would be understandable, reasonable? So I asked him and I said, do you hear when I sneeze? Again, I'm laughing because I know the topic is so silly. The content is silly.
Mhm.
And he said, I think so, usually. And I thought, okay, well, that's one debugging point. And then I said, how come you don't say it? And Tara, I am embarrassed to say it was probably the first time I had self on board when I was having this conversation with him. And so I did just have curiosity. I had set my judgment aside. I had enough work with my parts. And again, my parts never got over the top with this little thing, but I just had more space. And he said something that I could never have predicted. He said, well, I don't feel comfortable. Who am I to ask God to bless anybody? And I
Mm.
was like, I get that. Wow. Gotcha. How about Gesundheit? You know? And what's been really cool is that he's saying it now sometimes.
Mhm.
And not all the time, and that's fine, and it's not that I couldn't live without it. Obviously I can. But when we were able to have even a teeny tiny self-led conversation, me, the one having trouble being in self, we were able to actually understand something more about each other. And I really respected what he said. Who am I to ask God, to bless you? Because, I like appropriate humility. Do you know what I mean? I admire that. So I'm like, yeah, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So, who knows what's possible, right? We fixed sneezing.
And the expectations of the response.
Right, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
and this is something I do with my clients often is I hold a pen out just like this and I say the content, the stories, what we make meaning of is here. And a lot of us get caught here. And
Hmm.
because we get caught there, we are unable to come down to actually see what's happening for the person.
Yes,
And this
yes.
makes a lot of sense for people because we get so caught here that the ability to pause and then say, well, I am curious, what is going on for you? And then this is the moment when you break this threshold right here. This is when people start to feel seen.
I love that.
And that's, and
Yeah.
then I tell them, and it can be frustrating to get here. But when you get here, whether it's with your child, friend, spouse, whoever, and when it's done to you, can you feel when that happens, that feeling of being seen? Because
Mm,
that's when you both have broken this barrier right here.
that's so beautiful. So beautiful. And I bet people can really feel that even in a very visceral, embodied way of being seen.
Yeah.
I think, I'm just me. I don't know that this is really true, but it seems to me that there's a universal need to be seen for who we are and loved for who we are.
Yes. And that is the one thing that I work often with clients is how anxiety shows up and how anxiety is very much rooted with shame and how
Mm,
most people don't realize that because as a society, we hear that you're anxious and we throw a pill at it
yeah, right, right,
in the
right.
hopes of and really the pill is to give you more comfort but it also there's a huge trade and the trade is it's going to extend your window of tolerance to maybe things in life that need addressed.
That is such a good point. Right. Maybe your window of tolerance shouldn't be expanded until whatever things are worked through or ironed out, until it's safe enough, in a sense, to take things in.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about another anecdote that for some reason reminds me of this. And anyway, my both of my kids, as I've mentioned, they're young adults. They're grown and flown. They work, they have relationships, they're in good places. Um, but I remember I and not but I and I remember talking about them, when they were 16 and learning to drive, and even now, they both can't stand to drive. And it's because, for very good reason, they both, I mean, they do, but they both say, it's really, really dangerous and I don't like being in danger. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And I remembered reading, and I think this just makes sense too. Human beings aren't really built to go 60 to 80 miles an hour, right? Like we're not. And it's nice that we can. It provides a lot of benefits at a cost too. But the truth is, it would be understandable to be scared moving at that speed when your body's not designed to, right? Like it makes
Yes.
sense.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that you have to trust people that you don't know in other vehicles, that they're doing their due diligence to keep themselves safe, which in turn would keep you safe.
Right, right. There's
There's
so much that's out of your control. And
yes.
the fact that, many of us are comfortable driving speaks to, um, the numbing effect. I don't want to pathologize it too much. I don't want to say that people who are comfortable driving are wrong or anything
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
no.
But
Mhm.
but there, but there is, because I am comfortable driving for the most part, but there is a process of, adapting and normalizing and, I can't think, there's a word that I can't think of right now. But when the truth is, it is dangerous. It is dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I also want people to hear if you're on anxiety pill or pills for depression, it doesn't make you bad or wrong either. It
Right,
makes
of course.
sense that if you went to your doctor, you said some of the symptoms and they put you on it, that's the way that that is handled. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
just throwing that out there for people on if they're on it, and they may get to the point that they're curious of what's my brain like off of it. Am I in that
Abs-
boat of window of tolerance?
Absolutely, right.
And so I name that just so people understand, it's common. It is so normal. And what I have found in my own journey was so much of my anxiety was shame driven, and I just didn't
Mm,
know it.
mm,
And the importance of that, and the impacts of the pill, and how long you stay on it, and there's just a lot to it. And so for people, if they want to get curious, to get curious. And but before we end, I am curious. I know that when I was a supervisor, um outside of this field, that neuro a lot plays out at work.
mhm.
And I am curious on your thoughts, or what you how you help people who maybe are neurotypical. They have team members who are not, and
Mm,
there is just the communication isn't there because they're not literally speaking this. They're just missing each other.
mhm,
This we
mhm.
see this in couples as well. They're not speaking the same, and so the frequencies are never hitting.
Right.
For people who are in those leadership positions, if they're sitting here listening and they're like, okay, so what do I do?
Mhm, mhm,
What is something that I can easily do to help maybe not get caught here,
mhm,
but to actually get down to meet their team member where they're at?
mhm. Yeah, great. I love that. There's a lot of things, Tara, and so let me just kind of think about maybe some of the top the top things that we could list. This is not the interpersonal piece that you're asking about, and I will speak to that. But I think even just environmentally in a workplace where someone's going to be spending a lot of time, there are so many environmental things that can make people of different neurologies feel more comfortable. Things like, a lot of it, you're not, everybody's different, so you're not necessarily going to be predicting for everybody. But in general, options for lower lighting, let's say, the intense fluorescent lights, I think that some neurodivergent people can even like sort of perceive the frequency of the fluorescent lights, and it's almost like having a strobe light all the time or a noise going on with it. So variations in lighting, variations in, soundproofing if need be, or offering, allowing people to have accommodations if somebody wants to wear earplugs or have music, going or something like that. So really being open to if there are accommodations that a workplace can make that have no downsides to the employer, right? Do it. do it. So there are things like that, letting people have, fidgets or, to burn off energy if somebody has ADHD or frequent breaks, a lot of those kinds of things. So that actually, even though that's not interpersonal, that can make a huge difference in someone's comfort in being in a space, which then reduces the anxiety and the discomfort. Interpersonally, I'm really a fan of authentic conversations, and I know that when you were showing the pen and the stories and the dropping down, if someone, let's say there's a neurotypical person working with an autistic person, whether they know that they're autistic or not, and let's say that the autistic person has a tendency to speak a lot, to kind of monologue a bit, and maybe the neurotypical person gets annoyed by that or thinks it wastes time or whatever it might be. Outside of when it's happening, have a conversation about it, and a loving, respectful, self-led conversation about it, not like, hey, stop talking so much or shut up. But, gee, sometimes I'm pressed for time and I notice that you might like to provide a lot of detail. And I appreciate your knowledge, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how we might, negotiate that, for example. So being really transparent about it, but coming, as that only works if if people are coming from a self-led place, right? Honestly, some workplace environments might not be safe to have those conversations, unfortunately. But as someone on the neurotypical side, if you can bring that to an autistic person, that's great. And that's sort of that's an example of a neurotypical person bringing up something for their needs to be met, which is fine, and negotiating, but also bringing that curiosity to another person. You seem, I wonder if you're struggling, or just even, hi, how you doing? What's going on for you? And being really open to whatever kind of answers come back, whether you think it's quote weird, unquote, or not, that's fine. Being able, as you said so beautifully, to see the person for who they are and not just, oh, that person's, doing something, they're constantly jiggling their feet under the table. That's so annoying. Stop it. So not focusing on the behaviors, but focusing on the humanity of the other person and just being curious and loving about it.
Yeah.
It's a win-win, right? It's a win-win.
Yeah, and really too, when if someone likes to go through all the details and they can't just pick up mid-story, because that's very common.
Right,
It is hard to pick up in that mid-story because they want to go through all of it.
right, right, right.
And understanding that, okay, if I'm going to ask them a question or we're in a meeting and we don't have time for it, you can slow that down to before the meeting say, I'm going to ask you about this section.
Beautiful.
What do we need for this answer so that it can be reported out to all these other people
That's
without,
so
because what
smart.
you're going to stop right there is that messaging that the person is too much. You
Right,
give too much.
right, right. That is so great, Tara. That's a great example of an accommodation that not even an accommodation, but proactive work that, an employer or a neurotypical person can do. Again, trying to level that imbalance of comfort or discomfort versus trauma, right? I can do a little more. I can put myself a little out of my comfort zone by preparing ahead, telling you what's going to happen. It's not very hard for me to do that, and it's going to have really great results for all of us, potentially. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's just really vital too. Even if you have someone on your team who's like, "Hey, your instructions don't have all the details." That's the person to task.
Right,
What is it missing? Do a
right,
draft of it so we can collaborate together
right. I love it.
versus trying to push against their energy and you saying, "Well, I created this document and this is how we're going to do it."
Right,
Because they're going to bring a way to look at it in a very different way.
right.
So
Absolutely,
collaborate with them.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So we're towards the end. And I just, if there's anything else you would like anyone to know around the neurodiversity paradigm, um, I mean, what else would you like people to know or to really hold on to when they're navigating this world, and we're all interconnected. So we're all gonna bump into each other. It's going to happen.
right. I think just focusing on one takeaway is really for all of us to remember with every human being that we are all human beings with a full range of feelings and experiences, and ideas. And so just might not be seeing something on the outside that proves to you that someone is feeling or thinking something doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Yeah, that's really important. That ability to slow down and get curious of instead of telling someone what their experience is,
Right,
listening to what their experience is,
right,
even if you believe you hold their truth, which is
right,
really,
right, right.
yes. All
Right.
right, Kim, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And if people ever, if they want to say, hey, I want to know more about this, or how do we really start to dive into this a little deeper, do you have any recommendations of maybe a book to start with or websites? Where would
Mhm.
the trail, the beginning of the trail be, the trailhead?
Yeah, I can share a couple of ideas. Um, there's so much and there's so many different directions people can go. And, I mostly work with adults and specifically couples, but, someone might have family children that are neurodivergent or, a teacher, so there's all kinds of different domains. But there are two resources I'll share. One is a book I think I mentioned to you a long time ago, Neurotribes, is a wonderful book that talks about the history of autism and the pathologizing of it and sort of where it is, where it went to. And so that's a great resource to start with. In terms of websites, one of my favorites is called Reframing Autism. And it's an organization in Australia, and it's run by autistic people. So it doesn't cover other forms of neurodiversity. It's really geared toward autism. Um, but I think they are extremely professional. They offer a lot of on-demand learning and courses. And I'm sure they have services, but that's probably only relevant if you live in Australia. But that is a great organization, Reframing Autism. And then locally to me, in the greater Boston area, is a group called AANE, which is pretty well known in the US. And that's a great resource for um, referrals, for also for trainings, also for, they just have a lot of resources that are available internationally. Obviously, primarily time zone wise, the North American market is it's most accessible to people that live in the US and Canada mostly. But that's a great organization. And in both of those cases, the website is just the name of the organization. So aane.org, which I think they've changed names a few times. I think it stands for the I can't remember, something association for neurodiversity now. And Reframing Autism, same thing. Their name is the name of the website.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm very grateful for your time and looking forward to hopefully getting to collaborate with you again.
Great. Thanks so much, Tara. It's been great to be here with you.